Hello, everybody. Good evening. And I'm assuming that we are live. Yet we got some viewers coming in. Guess what? It's going to be just me tonight. I was out last week, and I believe Dr. Kelsey and Catherine, I know they did a video showing off the Dybbuk box and doing spirit box sessions and such. And I believe they were setting that up for this week to actually open the Dybbuk box. But as luck or unluck would have it, Dr. Kelsey has come down with a medical condition, so he can't be on here tonight. And Catherine is having an issue with her eyes, so she can't come on tonight. This is not a joke. We're not playing, or at least I'm not playing. No, I believe that they seriously just weren't in good shape to come on tonight. I don't think that has anything to do with the Dybbuk box issue. But tonight you've got me. And so we are going to do, as soon as I share this with all of our pages here, which shouldn't take long, we are going to do a spirit box with an adorable haunted doll that's sitting here to my right, your left. And I'm going to see what she can do tonight. I've got a new item here for her to play with while I'm doing the session. And hopefully she will use that, a new kind of trigger object that I picked up last week. I was inspired by not only the gathering we had a few weeks ago at Dr. Kelsey's house, there was a bell there that kept going off on its own. And then last week I was going through last week I was going through an antique store, and I came across a bell similar, but it was very antique. It was old hotel bell, but it had been bent and it wasn't working properly. And so I decided to go and look for my own, and I found one here. I don't know what hotel it came from, but I do have a bell. And here it is. So we are going to see if this works tonight as soon as we do our spirit box session in just a few moments. So let me go ahead and share on our pages here. We've got my page. We've already got this on Abnormal Alabama. And I'm going to share this on My Haunted Dolls, so people there can join in, because this is also My Haunted Dolls as well as Abnormal Alabama. And we have a couple of Facebook groups out there, a paranormal page and a haunted doll group. So we want to make sure they get to come in and join in on our fun here with the ghost stories. And I have a picture I'm going to be showing after the spirit box session a few weeks ago. We went out to a place here in Alabama, a very haunted antebellum home that is now a museum. And while I was outside, I captured an image that was very strange, kind of disturbing, within one of the windows of the house. So I'm going to show that and share the story of the ghost behind that. So be sure to stay tuned for that right after the haunted doll spirit box session. So we now have this shared everywhere, and I'm going to try to read comments since I'm by myself. Oh, look, much love watching from Pelham. Hey, out there. Thank you for joining. It's good to see hometown people here. For those of you out there that aren't from Alabama, I am from Alabama. And actually, I'm not far from Pelham. I live in Chelsea, so I'm not very far from you there. We like to get out to Pelham whenever we can because it's such a short distance away. And I've actually done paranormal investigation out there at a location I can't really mention because it's private and client privilege. So, but they have their share of ghost stories too. So, but let's go ahead and get down to business here with the haunted doll. Let me go ahead and set up my Spirit Box app, the Necrophonic. is what I like to use. So it is ready to go. But first, let me introduce to you the haunted doll, and I love her name, Haunted Doll Lizzie, as in Lizzie Borden. But no, this is not Lizzie Borden's ghost, although that would be very cool. This is little Lizzie, the spirit of a young child. I would guess she's around under the age of 10 for sure. I would think around 5 or 6 or maybe 7. And in the description of this video, I called her a silly girl of a haunted doll because she is a silly little girl with her little eyes cutting like that and like she's up to something. And when I take her to conventions, she likes to spook people. So I've had her at a convention before, and some people were creeped out by her doll, but she's a very sweet little girl. She's just playful and sometimes mischievous. Isn't that right, Lizzie? And sometimes her eyes roll on their own. So we might just catch that tonight. I haven't seen that happen in a while, but we'll see. Now, Lizzie, and she has a little name bracelet made by my friend Cherie. She is a doll from Cherie Shoon's collection in Georgia, and Cherie let me adopt her. Cherie is a big haunted doll collector. She has over 600 dolls, so she definitely outnumbers mine. But Lizzie was part of that collection, and Cherie let me bring her home. But there wasn't really a story with her, just that it was a little girl spirit that tended to hang around the doll. So we're going to try Spirit Box. I may have had Lizzie on the show way back when we used to do this from Columbiana, Alabama, at the old Abnormal Alabama office, but who cares? We're going to have her on tonight too. So we have the bell. So Lizzie, if you want to tap that and play with it, you can. You can even use it for yes or no answers if you need to. We have the cat ball that will light up if you play with it. There it goes. I love how it lights up. And we have this funny looking skull over this goofy guy here with the antenna sticking out of his head. If you touch that metal rod there, that metal stick looking thing, you make his eye flash and he makes weird little noises. So Lizzie, feel free to play with any of these things you want to. And I'm going to turn on this device in front of you that will help you hopefully speak to us. Hello, Lizzie. Oh, there was a hello. Is that you, Lizzie? I'm going to hold this device up here where everybody can hear. Ooh. I've got the necrophonic spirit box in my... Oh, that was a little girl's voice. Hello, is that Lizzie? I'm holding the box up here so people can hear it through my microphone, but Lizzie, please feel free to lean up here. Yeah, lean up here and talk into it. Lizzie, say hello to everybody. Lizzie, is that you? Lizzie, when I adopted you from Mama Cherie, she didn't have a last name for you. Can you tell me your last name? Is it Lizzie Smith, Lizzie Jones, Lizzie... Did you say G? Is it Lizzie G? Hello, Omar and Playful Rain. Thank you for joining us. Sound like a guy's voice said, cool. Lizzie, how old are you? Okay, there's a lot of voices. Can y'all please let Lizzie talk? Hey, Lizzie. Omar says your doll is so cute. I hear you, Lizzie. Just come talk to this device. I'll put the camera down here so you can. Tell us how old you are. Don't be shy. I know you're not shy. Did I hear it's Isaac? Who is Isaac? A friend? Does Isaac hang around your doll too? Dead. Lizzie, where are you from? If there's anything negative here, I need you to back away. You're not welcome here. I've heard some wailing and some strange noises. Lizzie, are you happy here? I didn't quite hear you. Is that a yes? Lizzie, if you're here, can you please play with one of the toys? You can ring the bell. Or you can play with that cat ball. Or you can tap the metal stick coming out of that skull there and make him be funny. It's okay, don't be afraid. I'm here with you. Is there more than one spirit with this doll? How many spirits are with this doll? I hear Lizzie. Lizzie, do you have a lot of spirits with you? If you want to, you can see if you can make a loud knock in here somewhere, and we might hear you. I hear you. I just can't hear what you're saying. Does your doll look like you? Lots. I sure am glad you're here, Lizzie. I just love having you here. And I love my spirit kids. Hey. Lizzie, can you sing a song? What's your favorite song to sing? I hear a little bit of singing there. What song are you singing? Did you get sick before? Is that what happened to you? Of course, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. We'll talk about something good. What's your favorite toy? Is your doll your favorite toy? What's your favorite game to play? I'll show a close-up of your little dress here. It's yellow with the little yellow flowers on the, I guess you'd call that kind of an apron or something there. That's what it looks like. It's not, it's part of the dress, but do you like your little dress, Lizzie? Well, I think it's perfect for your doll. I don't know what that wailing noise is, but I hear it so often, I just wonder if it's some sort of part of this app, just a little spooky effect. Lizzie, is there anything you'd like to tell us? No? I heard a whisper again. It's okay, you can talk to us. I hear you. Please say that again, Lizzie. I heard that same little girl's voice 15, 20 seconds ago that I've heard before earlier in this session. I really think that's Lizzie. Lizzie, I know you're not shy. Tell us something about you. A lot of the little spirits love that cat ball, but I guess you're not interested in it, are you, Lizzie? If you are, please make it go off there. Of course, with my luck, it'll probably go off as soon as I turn the camera over and start the rest of the show. Lizzie, can you ring that bell? All you gotta do is tap the top of it there. That big button thing sticking up there. Come on and ring my bell. Makes me think of that old song, Ring My Bell. But I'm not going to sing. I don't want to scare everybody off. Lizzie, is there anything you'd like to tell us? Are you just enjoying being here with Spirit Daddy? Sorry we didn't let Kitty Cat in here, but she'd be climbing all over everything while I'm trying to do the show. And she, no, that voice, no. Somebody does not like cats, I guess. But she loves her lap time, and she'd be in my lap this whole time. I didn't mean to talk over you, Lizzie. Can you say that again? Hey. Oh, Lizzie. You got the cutest voice. What's your favorite thing to do, Lizzie? She starts to talk and she gets a word or two out, and that's about all. Sometimes these little tiny spirits, they don't have a lot of energy, but they're so sweet. Are you having fun, Lizzie? Yeah. Is there a particular toy that you like besides what's out here? No. Do you like to play with the other children in the spirit family out there, the dolls? Are they being good to you? We're about to wind this down, so is there anything you'd like to say before we stop? I'm going to be talking about a ghost picture and telling some ghost stories here tonight. So I'll keep your doll in here so you can hang around with me till the end of the show. All right. Last chance. Is there anything you'd like to say before we stop? Anything you want to do with the toys before we stop? She just giggled. Did I just see her hand move? Maybe it's just me, but I thought I saw that hand move a little from side to side about 10, 15 seconds ago. It's probably just the camera. Yes, I hear you, Lizzie. I'm so happy you're here. Are you playing with your doll? Yeah. All right, we're going to let you play with your doll. I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and turn this box off in my hand, this device here. I'm going to turn it off. If there are any spirits that don't belong, I'm going to need you to move back or go back to where you came from. And all spirits back away. I'm going to count down from 5, so please be sure to back away when I get to 1. Okay? She said, okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Goodbye. Well, that was very precious. And that is little Lizzie, our little silly girl, playful girl doll. All righty. Let's get the camera back up here. Uh-oh, sorry about that. It's not over yet, folks. Next up on the agenda of this show, if you've tuned in since we began, since I did my intro, and you're wondering where Dr. Kelsey and Miss Catherine are, they are not with us tonight. Both of them are not feeling well. And if you tuned in last week, you saw them do the divot box experiment. I don't think it had anything to do with that. Dr. Kelsey has a dental appointment tomorrow. He's had some oral problems, and Catherine's had issues with her eye. So it's nothing that to do with any evil spirit or anything. But they were going to open the box tonight, and then it just didn't happen. So hopefully next week they'll be back. But tonight you've got me, and I'm about to share what I think is an authentic ghost picture that I took just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, if you want the exact date, it was Thursday, a week before last. That was on Thursday, the 21st of April. We had some friends, and the reason I was not here last week on the show, we had some friends from Baltimore. My dad's Air Force buddy and his wife came down to spend a week with us. We took them out to see sights. Each day we went somewhere different here in Alabama. And Thursday we went to Selma to visit Sturdivant Hall, which is, I think, the most beautiful antebellum home here in Alabama. I love it. I've been there 3 or 4 times now. And of course, it has a good, awesome, classic ghost story with it about the gentleman who once owned that plantation back in the mid-1800s. And I'm going to share that story with you as it was written, the way I heard it originally. But I want to show the picture I captured. Now, if you go to Sturdivant Hall, and I want to be sure to throw up a picture of it here. This is my picture outside the front of Sturdivant Hall. And if you go there, they have tours. I think they're open Tuesday through Saturday. So if you go out there, they'll take you a tour around inside the house, and they do share the ghost story. A lot of places like this don't like to be claimed haunted. But this place does not mind it. They enjoy their ghosts. So you can ask them about the ghost. They'll tell you about it on the tour without you even asking. But if you want to hear about experiences, you might have to probe a little bit. But they do not allow photography or video inside the house because where the house is located, it's sort of a bad part of town now. So for insurance purposes, they don't let anyone take pictures or video inside for fear that it might get posted online, and they don't want that online. So they only let you take pictures inside the house. Or I'm sorry, outside. I just got through saying don't take pictures inside the house. They only let you take pictures outside the house. You can walk all around outside after the tour, take pictures of the outside of the house all you want to, and the gardens that surround it. They've even got a little brick pond out there that had some fish in it. A big rose garden. It's this beautiful place. And I highly recommend it, especially if you're a paranormal enthusiast. At one time they did, but they do not at this time allow any nighttime investigations there. The house does belong to the state of Alabama and is run as a museum, a state attraction. It's not a bed and breakfast. You can't stay there overnight. Although way long ago, 20, 30 years ago, they had a few special events where they had a paranormal team come through. But other than that, it's only daytime, Tuesday through Saturday. I think it's 9 to 4. And you can take a tour. It's $5 a person, very cheap. And so the ghost story behind this I'm about to get to, but I want to share the picture that I caught in the back of the house. Whenever I visit Sturtevant or any other haunted place like this, especially a house, I go around taking pictures of each side. And when I get home and get the photos downloaded, I like to zoom in on the windows to see if I've captured anything, because I have captured a couple of faces peering out of the front window of Sturtevant Hall before, but this time I caught it in the backside. So I'm going to go ahead and share the picture with you that I captured behind the house. And I have circled this area here that looks like a face peering out. Now, this was a photo of the backside of the house, but I had zoomed in here and circled the area that stuck out to me when I downloaded the pictures and noticed this anomaly, whatever. I mean, it looks like a face to me, sort of. The face is kind of turned slightly to the side, like it's peering around the curtain there, kind of peeking out. And go a little closer. It looks like you can see a hairline. You can see eyes and a nose and a mouth and even a chin. It looks like a face peering around the curtain inside there. What is behind that window is one of the big parlor. Well, let's see. Actually, in that room is the dining room on the back side of the house. So you're looking at the dining room window. They got a big table and a lot of stuff, antique dishes on display in there. And so a lot of people would have enjoyed that room inside there, dining every night. And Playful Rain commented, I see it. Well, I'm about to show you, when I posted this last week and shared it on my Facebook, a friend of mine took it and she went in and I don't know what the word has slipped my mind, but she enhanced the photo so that you can see the face even more distinctly. And here it is. So, I mean, you can see the eyes, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the hairline on the forehead up there, the chin. It's like somebody, possibly a male, is peeking around the curtains. So, hello to Quinlan. Thank you for joining us. We're talking ghosts tonight. And I'm talking about Sturtevant Hall. Playful Rain said, I see it. All right. So that is the photo of the ghost that I captured at Sturtevant Hall. So let me go back and Show again. This is when I first zoomed in on the picture of the back window. You see the face. And then I zoomed in a little bit closer. And then a friend of mine enhanced the photo, brightened it up and enhanced it where the face sticks out even more. To me, that is very creepy, and I love it. And the reason I think it's a male face is because they're the main ghost, the famous ghost of this house, is that of the previous owner, John Parkman. Sorry, I paused there. I saw one of the either Kelsey or Catherine just messaged, "Hello, everyone. Sorry I could not see to drive today." I think that's Catherine. "I'll be back next week so we can open the Dybbuk box." So hopefully we'll get the Dybbuk box open next week. But until then, I'll entertain you. So I want to share with you the story. It's Catherine. Yep. As soon as I saw I could not see to drive today, I knew that was Catherine. So, but okay. So, who is this man, this spirit who haunts Sturtevant Hall? John Parkman is the ghost that haunts this beautiful home. And I want to read to you the story that this is the original way I heard it, as told and written by Catherine Tucker Wyndham, a famous Alabama writer who published the book 13 Alabama Ghosts in Jeffrey. And I love Catherine. God rest her soul. She passed away 10 years ago, but her storytelling lives on. And this is the first time that I've captured, well, it might not be the first time, but this is an honor that I was able to capture the photo of a spirit that she wrote about because she's my favorite author. So let's go ahead and let me share the story of the case of the ruined banker of Selma, the ghost of John Parkman. One afternoon, not long ago, a guide was showing a group of tourists through Selma's Sturtevant Hall. The visitors had been given a brief history of the mansion from the time of its construction in 1852, and after admiring graceful proportions of the downstairs parlors, they were guided to an upstairs bedroom. It was here, in the quiet of this corner room, that the guide, while describing the rope-laced trundle bed and other old-fashioned furnishings, suddenly stopped in mid-sentence. The guests noticed that she had become very pale, and one of the men in the group started to help her to her chair, or to a chair nearby. But before he reached her, she took a deep breath and continued her interrupted story. After the tour was over and the visitors had gone, the guide hurried to her friend, who was keeping the guest register. "He's here again," she exclaimed. "He brushed against me in the upstairs bedroom. I never felt anything quite like it. His touch was clammy and frightening. And just last week, he was in the downstairs parlor, too. I'll never forget how that sudden rush of cold air felt. It seems he always comes when there are groups of tourists here. I can't decide whether he dislikes having strangers in his home or whether he wants to remind me to tell the people his remarkable success story and what a fine person he was. Whatever the reason, I know John Parkman's ghost is right here in Sturtevant Hall." So John McGee Parkman lived in the white columned mansion now known as Sturtevant Hall for only 3 years, from 1864 to 1866, but they were three of the happiest years of his life. At the age of 29, Parkman was president of the First National Bank of Selma, a new institution with a capital of $100,000. He had a charming wife and two beautiful little daughters, Emily Norris Parkman and Maria Hunter Parkman. He occupied a place of esteem in the social and business life of Selma, and his home was one of the most splendid in the entire Black Belt. Excuse me. Life was good for the Parkmans. Then, with a suddenness that shocked the entire community, John Parkman's career ended in disgrace. The youthful bank president was the victim of the same error of judgment that ruined older and more experienced businessmen during the post-war period. He speculated in cotton. Soon after, he had invested large sums of the bank's money in the cotton. Excuse me. Take a little drink here. The price of fiber dropped from 30 and 35 cents to 15 and 18 cents per pound, and Parkman's bank lacked the funds to cover the losses. Because federal money was deposited in the First National Bank, General Wager Swain, commanding officer of the United States troops in the Selma district, moved in quickly, closed the bank, and placed Parkman under arrest. Parkman was taken under guard to Cahaba and confined in Castle Morgan, the prison which had only a short time before been used by the Confederate government for the incarceration of Yankee prisoners. Up to this point, the facts about Parkman's life are clear, but there are confusing and conflicting reports regarding what happened after his imprisonment, particularly what happened following his escape from the stockade at Cahaba. According to one story, friends in Selma, men who believed that Parkman's poor judgment did not merit such severe punishment, arranged for his escape from Castle Morgan. They first bribed the warden of the prison to cooperate with them in carrying out the escape plan. Then they arranged for a steamer to be waiting at the Cahaba Wharf, some 50 yards down the bluff from the prison, to pick Parkman up. The scheme called for a group of musicians dressed in outrageous costumes to march up and down in front of the stockade to divert the guards while Parkman climbed over the rear wall of the enclosure and then escaped by running down the bluff to the waiting boat. Every detail of the planned prison break seemed perfect. The costume musicians were putting on a splendid show at the prison entrance. The warden had left Parkman's cell unlocked, and the boat was waiting. But someone saw Parkman as he was climbing over the wall and gave the alarm. Several shots were fired. Some witnesses said Parkman was shot as he dived into the river. Others said he was so frightened by the shots that he dived under the boat and was killed by the big paddle wheel. Still others contended that he made good his escape. There was even disagreement about who fired at Parkman. One report was that his so-called friends shot him to make certain that Parkman would never divulge information which would have linked them with the bank scandal. These friends, one story relates, claimed his body in secret and, hidden by the thick shrubbery, buried it at night near a scuppernong arbor at the rear of Sturtevant Hall. Another more romantic but less plausible story says the young man's body was swept by the current down the Alabama River and that it finally lodged in the low limbs of a willow tree. It was the same tree, this story states, whose limbs had broken the window in their stateroom when Parkman was bringing his bride up the river from Mobile to Selma aboard a luxury river steamer. If there are questions concerning Parkman's death, there is little question regarding the return of his ghost to his beloved Sturtevant Hall. Students of the supernatural say the ghost came back to try to clear Parkman's name of the blemish cast on it by his handling of the bank's funds, and perhaps their theory is right. He did not return to Sturtevant Hall immediately after his death. In fact, it was not until after his home had been sold to Emil Gilman, about 3 years after the Castle Morgan episode, that Parkman's ghost first visited the premises. The property, for which Parkman had paid $65,000 when he purchased it in February 1864, brought only $12,000 when it sold to Gilman, and the transaction left Parkman's family destitute. Servants in the home, many of whom had been employed by Parkman, were the first to be aware that his spirit had returned. They refused to walk through the back lot near the carriage house after dark, and even during the daytime, they avoided the shadowy area with its thick growth of fig trees and scuppernong vines. "Mr. Parkman is there," they would answer when asked why they skirted around the back lot. "He's come back to haunt." 3 or 4 of them stoutly declared that they had seen Parkman walking about in the orchard. Others were equally firm in their assertions that they had seen him on the side portico, leaning against the iron grillwork railing. And still others told of having seen him quite distinctly gazing out from the cupola atop the house, where in life Parkman liked to stand and look out over his property to watch the workers in the fields. Some say he still goes there in spirit. All of the servants who talked of having seen Parkman affirmed their belief that he was buried near the Scuppernong arbor and that his restless spirit roamed from that grave. Even when they were told that Parkman was properly interred in the family lot in Live Oak Cemetery, they kept insisting, "Mr. Parkman is right here. He's buried under the fig tree by the arbor, and he's troubled and restless, mighty restless." It must indeed be the restless, troubled ghost of John Parkman that wanders through the spacious rooms and around the grounds of the home he loved, appearing only when crowds of people are present. Is he objecting to the intrusion of these strangers into his home? Is he trying to play again the role of gracious host to a nice gathering of guests? Or is he seeking a defender, someone who will clear him of the stigma that has marred his good name? That was a story shared by Catherine Tucker Wyndham, and I can add my 2 cents here to this story. It's not just John Parkman's ghost who haunts this house, though I do believe that that is his face peering out the window in my photo. But he also has some company with him. His 2 daughters, who both died young, the little Parkman daughters. From what I understand, they both died of illness in their young adult years. They are believed to have come home to Sturtevant to do their haunting because 2 little girls have been spotted inside the home, running up and down the stairs, playing around on the second floor, and in their old nursery room where they loved playing with their dolls. In fact, a couple of their dolls are still there, and I think their spirits love to come back and play with them. People wandering outside the home have told of seeing the faces of the 2 little girls in the upstairs windows peering out, interested by the visitors outside in their yard. I was standing out there in my first visit there in 2003 and took a picture. And in the front window on the bottom floor, in fact, in this photo you're looking at, it was the bottom window to the far right. Far right. So I was standing further to the side of the house when I took it. And in the window, it looked like 2 little girls and a male figure peering out. You could see the little girl, so clear was she that you could see the shawl around her shoulders. So, where is that photo, you ask? Unfortunately, my laptop in 2004 totally blew up. It crashed. And I lost all photos there. And that was back before the time of thumb drives. And I didn't get those saved to disk that I know of. I've tried to look on the disks that I have, but I have not found those pictures. So I assume I don't have them anymore. But I do have this new photo. I guess Mr. Parkman knew of my plight and decided to appear in the window once again for a special photo op, for that does look like the face of a man peeking around the curtains looking out. And I do believe that is John Parkman passing through his dining room where he once sat for supper and breakfast and dinner. And I do believe his little girls are still in that home because I felt their presence there when I visited. So that is the ghost of Sturdivant Hall, the ghost of John Parkman, the famous ruined banker of Selma, Alabama. So I hope you enjoyed that story. There's a few more to come here as we wind down our first hour here. In fact, I am late in running Dr. Kelsey's little thing down below there for the wishing machine. The Wish Doctor's Wishing Machine, now on sale, www.thewishdoctor.com, scrolling down below there. If you're wondering what this background picture is, that's just a random Google ghost girl photo. Here, I'll take myself off here so you can see. Just a random, cool, creepy photo I found. I thought that looked cool in the background. But also because a few of our stories tonight involve young girl apparitions. In fact, the next one I'm going to tell came from my own hometown. So stay tuned for that. But first, let's go ahead and I believe there is a commercial down here that I like to run for Dr. Kelsey. So I'm going to go ahead and run that whilst I clear my throat. All right. And I thought that was pretty cool, those little special effects he put in there. But I think my favorite is this one with the little tombstone. Just gives a nice little break for me while I clear my throat there. So, before I get started with the next story, which I'm going to read from my book, The Legends of Indian Narrow's Ghostly Childhood Memoirs. So be sure to check that out if you haven't. It's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, it's even on audiobook, on Audible, I think on iTunes, but it's on Audible and it's on Amazon audiobook. And I am the one who performs it, so you can hear me read the stories if you have Audible. And if you just want to read it yourself, it's on my website, paperback, myhauntedDolls.com. There you go. And all of the rest of my books are out there. I've got some supernatural novels, Crimson the Blood Painting, which is based on an actual haunted painting in my house here, part of my haunted collection. It came from Selma, this picture, and it hung in the home of a practicing witch, allegedly practicing witch. But the story was kind of neat. I said, I could make a novel out of this. So I did. Mostly it's fiction, but it is based on a real haunted item. if you like nonfiction, you've got Legends of Indian Narrows, Ghostly Childhood Memoirs about the ghost stories of the neighborhood I grew up in West Jefferson. And I have books about my haunted collection. I seem to be, here we go. I was about to say, I seem to be missing some book covers, but here we go. This is the sequel, My Haunted Collection, The Dark Side. The first book is called My Haunted Collection. I published that in 2014, and that told about the original items in my collection. But last year I published this one, the sequel, My Haunted Collection, The Dark Side, about the scarier, more terrifying items in my collection. And I have a new book out, Dark Awakening and Other Tales for a Midnight Hour. This has a collection of my original short horror stories. It's available on the website and it's on Amazon, and it's even in, this is my first book that's in hardback. In fact, I have a copy of the hardback right here, and it is beautiful. I love it. My first hardbound book to be published. So get yours today. And I'm not the only writer here. We have Dr. Kelsey Graham, our usual host, who is out this evening. Dating the Dead and Spectrophilia. You can find this at datingthedead.com. He's got some awesome, strange stories here about people who have dated or married paranormal beings and even items. So it's interesting. Very strange. But you can check that out. And of course, his wishing machines at that scrolling at the bottom down there, thewishdoctor.com. I think he had another photo. Here it is of the wish machine. There you go. It's a pretty interesting device that will possibly grant you wishes. So when Dr. Graham gets back next week, he'll tell some more about that. Dr. Kelsey, we call him. So now to end our commercial break and get on to hour 2 here. I'm going to go as long as I can. Hopefully I won't get that irritating tickle in my throat. This time of year, I get allergies playing with me with all the pollen out there, especially when I go for walks. But this story I'm going to share, this is very tragic, pretty gruesome. So just be forewarned. It might not be for the squeamish. And it is based on allegedly a true event. I don't have any way to prove it happened, but it makes for an awesome urban legend, if nothing else. This is from my old neighborhood, which is actually called Indian Meadows. I changed the name for the book originally, but I may change it back and republish this book. I was just worried about offending somebody or getting sued, but I think it might be okay. So whilst I tell this story of a poor, ghostly female figure whose picture I thought I had up here, but that nice, creepy Google photo, here we go. I'm going to bring her forward from the background while I share my story. This is called Cami's Ghost. Our neighborhood, Shady Grove, was comprised of 3 streets. The main street that led into the neighborhood, a smaller back street that branched off from it, and a third, even smaller street that branched off from the second. Houses lined each road on both sides. On the third street, a vacant lot rested at the end. Most of the children I grew up with passed around stories of a house that once sat in that lot, but it was long ago burned down and cleared away. It is believed the parents of the neighborhood destroyed it years ago in an attempt to erase the evil that once occurred in that house. A 2-story suburban house that was once home to a couple with a little daughter named Cami. Cami, which was short for Camille, lived with her mom and dad on that property sometime back in the early 70s, right after the neighborhood was built. Cami was the only child of Dell and Alice, a couple known for their drinking and quick tempers. Dell worked at the local steel plant, and at night, He often frequented the local bars before returning home. The old lush. Alice, a stay at home mom, dealt with a mental condition all of her life which caused her to have mood swings. When Dale returned home each night, he and Alice usually clashed in such a way that the neighbors of that back street heard every syllable coming from those walls. Unfortunately, Dale and Alice sometimes took out their frustrations on little Cami. Neighbors never ceased to be taken aback by Cami's beauty. The little 8-year-old girl strongly resembled a china doll with her flowing dark tresses, crystal blue eyes, and porcelain skin. Such beauty made it quite easy for neighbors and teachers alike to notice when the bruises frequently showed up on her face or arms. All the same explanations came from her mother each time and time again. Oh, Cammy fell down the steps outside, or oh, Cammy fell on something in the backyard while playing. No one ever actually witnessed her parents abusing her, therefore, no legal action could be taken. Everyone knew that if something was not done soon, the abuse would turn tragic. The prediction shortly came true. One evening, Dale came home in a drunken state and became enraged at Cammy over her accidentally breaking a glass in the kitchen. Yanking Cammy up by her arm, he dragged her up the stairs and into her room. Alice followed with a belt. They took turns beating Cammy with the belt, using the metal end, over and over while Cammy begged and pleaded. Soon blood oozed from her cuts in her skin and from her mouth and nose. Dell and Alice did not let up. They continued beating and beating until Cammy's small body was swollen and bloody all over. Dell eventually became so enraged that he used his fists. The blows to her head were nothing short of fatal. Cammy eventually lost consciousness. She never woke up. Dell took her bloody, battered little corpse and tossed it into the bedroom closet, leaving it there without a care. After a few days went by, the school's concern for Cammy's absence grew. They reported the missing child to the police. A county sheriff's deputy went to the house just to check on the family. When her mother opened the door, her appearance left no doubts that she was under the influence of drugs. The smell of death inside prompted him to search the house. Cammy's body was discovered still curled up in a bloody heap on the floor of her bedroom closet. The police arrested Dell and Alice. As the story goes, Dell spent the rest of his life in prison, and Alice was locked away in a mental institute where she reportedly died a few months later due to unknown causes. Cammy's body was given a proper burial in the cemetery of a local Methodist church. The house remained empty for almost a year until a couple from Georgia moved to the area and purchased it. Their 13-year-old daughter, Tina, automatically took a dislike to the house, sensing something was very wrong there. Her parents explained away her feelings on her being upset about moving away from her old school and friends. They shrugged it off and settled into their new home. Tina moved into Cammy's old bedroom. Right away, she noticed a funny smell that came and went in her room, but its source could not be pinned down. Her father believed perhaps a mouse had gotten itself trapped in one of the walls and died. Tina refused to believe this explanation and felt it was something more sinister. The family knew nothing of the events that took place in the house the prior year. However, the past soon came to light, as it often does. Late one night, a few months after moving into the house, Tina awoke in her bed to a sound she could not make out at first. Sitting up in bed, she listened closely to the sound, which now seemed to come from her closet. Straining her ears, she finally made out the sound of a whimper, a child's whimper. Tina slid out of bed and the noise stopped. The first thought to enter her mind was that she must have still been asleep, or perhaps she had just heard a neighbor's child crying. Not giving it another thought, she slid back into bed and fell asleep once again. The next night, Tina awoke to the same sound, only this time it came louder. Tina knew she was wide awake. She lay in bed and listened to the sound. After a few moments, realization entered her mind that the sound was coming from her closet. Eventually, she climbed out from under her covers and crossed the room to the closet door. Grasping the knob in her hand, she yanked open the door, and the whimpering automatically ceased. Peering inside, she found only her clothes hanging neatly inside and her shoes resting in rows on the floor of the closet where she had last seen them. Closing the door, Tina returned to bed. The next morning, Tina told her parents about the incident over breakfast. Naturally, they shrugged it off as only a dream. Tina knew otherwise. Later that evening, she developed a headache and excused herself to bed early while her parents remained in the living room downstairs watching television. Tina retreated to her bed upstairs and fell fast asleep. A few hours later, she awoke to a familiar sound, only this time it was much louder. The distinct sob of a child drifted from her closet. Frightened but overly curious and also fed up of the unexplained noise, Tina hopped out of her bed and stormed to the closet door. With every step closer to the door, the sobbing grew louder. Tina grabbed hold of the knob and noticed immediately how icy it felt in her hand. She threw open the door and peered inside. Down on the closet floor, much to her horror, Tina did not find her shoes in neat rows. This time, the image of a small girl curled up in a fetal position lay on the floor, her eyes squeezed shut, her small hands curled into fists, blood and tears streaming down her face onto her dress. Blood also poured from open wounds on her face, arms, and legs. Tina erupted into a fit of screams and raced from her room. She fled down the hallway and down the stairs, skipping every other step as she ran. Before she could reach the bottom of the stairs, an enraged female voice broke the air above her and froze her in place. Cami, stop right there. Tina slowly turned and looked to the top of the stairs. Standing at the landing above, the apparition of a woman glared down at her. Blood spattered across the apparition's dress as she held up a leather belt high in her hand. Come back here. How dare you run from your mother? I must teach you obedience. Tina finally found her voice and screamed once again. Finally, regaining movement in her legs, she bolted from the stairs into the living room where she was met by her already alarmed parents. Sobbing, Tina blurted out what she had just witnessed in her bedroom closet and on the stairs. While her mother kept her in the living room and attempted to calm her, her father searched the entire house but found no signs of intruders. Tina's closet sat empty, other than her clothes and shoes. Tina refused to ever return to her bedroom. Eventually, her parents began having their own experiences of the ghostly child weeping in the night and the shouts of an angry mother. When they finally learned of the tragic history there, they quickly moved out. The house once again sat vacant. Neighbors and passers-by soon told of hearing strange cries and shouts from the house at night. The property never sold again. Eventually, a mysterious fire burned it down to only a foundation. Some say the neighbors on that street grew tired of the evil place and decided to destroy it. But there was never any evidence of who or what caused the fire. The remains were eventually cleared away, and only the vacant lot remained. Though the house was destroyed, the hauntings refused to die with it. Shortly after the lot was cleared, neighbors reported seeing Cami's spirit prowling the property at night. The ghost was mostly seen standing near the edge of the property, close to the street, her arms outstretched as she cried out to the night, tears streaming down her face and blood trickling down her flowing dress and legs. She always seemed to be waiting for someone to come and save her, to care for her like she'd never been cared for in life. People in the area began to steer clear of that section of the neighborhood, especially at night. Because no one came to her rescue, apparently Cami's spirit decided to expand her haunting to the rest of the neighborhood. One night, a young girl named Sarah, who lived on the main street of the neighborhood, awoke in her bed to the sound of whimpering. Sitting up in bed, she saw the apparition of a little girl standing in her room at the foot of the bed, with her arms outstretched, beckoning for Sarah as she cried, blood spilling down her dress. Sarah screamed, and the apparition vanished. Soon, reports began flying around the neighborhood of different people in different houses waking up at night to find the same small apparition in their bedroom, always standing at the foot of the bed, always crying with her arms outstretched. The apparition could appear on any night in any house of the neighborhood. There was never a rhyme or reason to her appearance. No one knew when nor where her spirit might show up next. This, of course, caused widespread panic in the area and resulted in some of the neighbors abandoning their homes. Eventually, the reports died down. The sightings of Cami became less and less frequent, but the legend remained. Children of the neighborhood still often scared each other with taunts about the ghost. Better watch out, or Cami might show up in your room tonight, eh? The story of Cami would then be related again to yet another generation of audience members, and it continues today. No official report exists confirming the story of Cami and her parents, or that they ever lived in the neighborhood, or that there ever really was a house in that vacant lot. The legend, however, lives on. From time to time, some still report seeing her in different areas of the neighborhood. And those who relate her story will share the same belief for why her ghost continues to haunt. She's just looking for a loving family to take care of her. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I enjoyed telling it. Well, we got time for another story. It's only 8:15, so I'm going to share another story of another tiny ghost. This one not quite as bloody or gruesome, but it is a tragic story and kind of sad, and it touches your heart. I've been to this house twice. It's located in a place called West Point, Mississippi, near very near Columbus, Mississippi, actually. In fact, Columbus also claims this house as being part of their historical trail there. If you go to Columbus, Mississippi during their spring pilgrimage, you might get to see the house. I heard, even though it was open all year round every day in the past for tours, I heard in recent years it temporarily closed. I'm not sure if it still is, but I would say before driving out there, be sure to check with the Tourism Bureau in Columbus, Mississippi before going out there and banging on the door of an empty house. But hopefully it's back open or soon will be. And it's a place called the Waverly Mansion. Not to be confused with Waverly Sanatorium. No, no, no. This is a different place, the Waverly Plantation Mansion. Beautiful home, as you can see there, with probably the biggest cupola, that big room on top of the roof there, that round cupola sticking up there. Most cupolas were smaller. This thing is huge, though. And I'm going to read to you the story that goes with this. And I have been to this house before. I'll tell a little bit about that later. But first, I wanted to go ahead and share the story of this adorable little spirit in that home. And there are other spirits believed to be there, but hers is the definite most famous of that home. And this story, sadly enough, is called Little Girl Lost. So, sorry for the pause. I'm just trying to get back to the beginning of the story here. So, Little Girl Lost. Sometimes, when Mrs. Robert Snow is conducting visitors on a tour of her spectacular home, Waverly, she is tempted to say, "And here in this upstairs bedroom is where our ghost, the ghost of a little girl, used to take her naps." Instead, she tells about the tall tester bed with its hand carved posts, the decorative iron lining in the fireplace, and other features of the big room. Though she does not mention the ghost of the little girl who haunts Waverly, Mr. Snow does glance quickly at the bed each time she enters the room. She looks to see if it has been rumpled by a weary child, a ghost child. The ghost came to Waverly about 2 years after Mr. and Mrs. Robert Allen Snow Jr. bought the abandoned showplace in 1962, and though the spirit has made no manifestation of her presence for several years, Mr. Snow still keeps hoping she will come back home. Waverly itself, the house, haunted Mr. and Mrs. Snow before they ever saw the fine old place. A stranger walked into their antique shop in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, different Philadelphia. Their antique shop in Philadelphia, Mississippi. For those of you who don't know, there is a Philadelphia in Mississippi. So, into their antique shop one day and described to them the grandest, most majestic house that was ever seen. The house, the man said, was somewhere along the Tombigbee River between West Point and Columbus, Mississippi. He had come upon it quite by accident years before, and even then it was bearing the signs of neglect that houses show when people desert them and condemn them to loneliness. "I doubt there's anything left there now," the stranger said. "Some bricks and rotting timber, maybe. The house is probably gone. It was years ago when I saw it, but what a place it was." He talked of the massiveness of the structure, of the graceful columns, the iron grillwork, the marble steps leading to the recessed porches. But it was his description of the house's soaring rotunda that captured the Snow's fancy. Well, see, you walk into this huge entrance hall, big as a ballroom, I guess. Maybe that's what it was. And you look up, and there's this octagonal balcony all the way around the sides of the big hall. No supports or nothing. Then above that, there's another balcony just like it, and then another balcony above that. 3 balconies circling that tremendous room. Then you keep looking up, and there's this cupola, all decorated with plasterwork, 55 or 60 feet maybe, up over your head. And that's not all. There's a chandelier hanging down all the way from that high cupola to the middle of the ballroom. It's hard to believe there's a house like that sitting vacant right out there in those woods, or there was. As I said, it's been years since I saw it. It's probably gone now. Well, after the man had left their shop, Mr. and Mrs. Snow talked about the house and wondered about it, wondering if any structure could be as magnificent as their customer had pictured it. They could not forget his description of the house. They kept thinking of the sweeping rotunda with its 3 tiers of cantilevered balconies and of the cupola that soared maybe 60 feet straight up. One day, Mr. Snow said, "I've got to look for that house. I can't get it out of my mind, and I must find out if it's still standing." So the Snows went house hunting. They drove to the Columbus West Point area and took a dirt road toward the river. At the river, they saw an elderly black man who lived as if he had lived in the area for a long, long time. They described the house to him and asked if he knew where it was. "Oh, you must be hunting the mansion," he said. "It's still out there in the woods, as far as I know." And he gave them directions for reaching the place. The couple parked their car where their informant had directed them to, and they got out to begin their search on foot. They'd gone only a short distance when the tops of tall magnolia trees, glistening in the thickets of cedars and gums, indicated that they had found the home site. They pushed through heavy undergrowth and snarls of vines until they reached a sort of clearing, and there it was. Looming up before them was a house grander than any they had ever imagined. Even with its sagging shutters and drab walls, and with its unchecked growth of strangling vegetation, the house had dignity and a touching air of defiance. The house looked as if it had been waiting for Mr. and Mrs. Snow to rescue it. After the couple had purchased the house, there was never any doubt that if they possibly could, they would find the owners and would buy Waverly in 1962. And they and their 3 children hacked a path from the road to the house and moved in. For the first time since 1913, Waverly was occupied. During the nearly half century that the grand old place stood vacant, ghostly legends flourished about Waverly. Nocturnal visitors told of hearing the sounds of sprightly music and laughter and dancing feet in the long, deserted house. Others told of seeing a kaleidoscope of faces in the tall, dusty mirrors in the stairwell. Faces, perhaps, of people who had paused to gaze into those mirrors long ago and whose reflections were eternally etched on the silvery surfaces. There were accounts, too, of sightings of a ghostly Native American riding a loping horse across the prairie near Waverly. The Snows, when they heard these stories, listened with interest, just as they listened to all stories about Waverly and its former occupants. They understood such a house as theirs almost demanded the presence of ghosts, and they realized that it would have been considered an affront, a deliberate insult by the spirit world, if Waverly had not been properly haunted. They even decided who some of the ghosts might be, giving them names and identities. The Native American horse rider, of course, was Major John Pitchlynn, Sr., who really was not a Native American at all, though most people thought he was. Pitchlynn, the orphan son of an English officer, was reared by the Choctaws and adopted their customs. He grew to be a wealthy and influential man, and when he died in 1835, many people of prominence attended his funeral rites near the present site of the Waverly home. In accordance with Choctaw custom, Pitchland's war paraphernalia was placed in the coffin with him. His horse, a fine animal, which Pitchland rode almost daily over the large acreage he owned, was brought to the edge of the grave to be killed and buried with his owner. At this point in the ritual, Judge Samuel Golson of Aberdeen interrupted the ceremony to plead for the animal's life. "It's not necessary to take the life of this fine animal," he said to Pitchland's widow. "The Great Spirit already has a gallant mount, a horse worthy of so fine a rider, waiting for our friend in the happy hunting grounds." The widow was moved by the judge's plea, and she spared the life of the horse. The ghostly Indian seen near Waverly, the Snows decided, could only be the restless spirit of John Pitchland coming back to get his beloved horse and ride him to the happy hunting grounds. Sometimes they played a game of trying to guess whose ghostly images would be caught in the mirrors at Waverly. One of the reflections would, of course, certainly be that of Colonel Young himself, Colonel George Hampton Young, the builder of Waverly. Though he was not a vain man, Colonel Young must have looked at himself with pride. Any man could be proud of Waverly and of the family Colonel Young reared there. The colonel, a native of Oglethorpe County, Georgia, came to Mississippi in 1835 to attend the land sales at Pontotoc. He liked what he saw, and he stayed. He had practiced law in Georgia and had served in the state legislature. He studied law at Georgia's Franklin College and at Columbia College in New York. But land development claimed his interest in Mississippi. He first settled on a farm near West Point on what was known as Colbert Prairies. The land bore the name of James Colbert, a white settler among the Chickasaws, from whom Colonel Young bought 5 sections of land. Later, he purchased land at Mullins Bluff on the Tombigbee River, where he established a permanent home for his family. It was here, to Waverly, that Mrs. Young brought boxwood plants from her beloved Georgia. She and her children and the boxwood plants jostled in a wagon from Georgia across northern Alabama to their new home in the Mississippi wilderness. The aristocratic boxwood, Mrs. Young felt, were appropriate reminders of the family's sentimental and cultural ties with Georgia. They somehow symbolized a way of life dear to her, so she cared for the plants during the tiring journey almost as carefully as she tended her children. Mrs. Young planted her boxwood in the prairie soil, but she never saw the beauty they lent to the landscaping of Waverly because she died before that grand house was completed. The boxwoods still thrive at Waverly, where visitors marvel at their size. The plants have grotesque shapes, though, having been pruned by generations of deer munching on their branches. Mrs. Young would never have approved of that. The children grew up at Waverly, the 6 sons and 4 daughters, and several of them were married there. Colonel Young had prepared for those weddings when he planned Waverly. The parlor contains an arched alcove outlined with decorative plastering, designated as the wedding alcove, and here the bridal couple stood for their wedding ceremonies. The imaginative and progressive master of Waverly incorporated other luxurious features into his home. The chandeliers were lighted with gas, which he manufactured by burning fat pine knots in a retort near the house. There were bathtubs big enough for leisurely soaking, and for summer use there was a brick and marble swimming pool at the foot of a gentle hill. There were also an ice house, a cotton gin, a tannery, a sawmill, a grist mill, a brick kiln, orchards, vineyards, stables, gardens, kennels, warehouses, a boathouse, and a ferry. Waverly was almost a self-contained fiefdom. No one could fault the creator of such an estate if he paused to admire himself from the every once in a while. Colonel Young's face would logically be one of the fleeting, changing montage of images glimpsed in the mirror. The Snows tried to name other ghostly faces who had interrupted walks across the ballroom to gaze at their reflections in the mirrors. Who were they? Guests at balls, their names long forgotten? Maybe soldiers, bearing the proud name of Young? Politicians come to discuss current topics with Colonel Young? Maybe some visiting artisans and scholars, or plantation musicians and traveling preachers, servants and overseers. They all certainly left their mark on Waverly, so perhaps it is their ghostly faces that now peer from inside those mirrors. The sounds of partying that reportedly came from the long, empty house could also be accounted for. With a family of 4 beautiful daughters and 6 handsome sons, Waverly's master delighted in hosting parties and balls for them. On many nights, hundreds of couples danced beneath the cupola in the great rotunda, guests of the genial and hospitable Colonel Young. Surely such sounds of gaiety and music would hover above Waverly, clamoring to be heard again even decades later. Though they found it entertaining to try to account for and identify the ghosts that they had inherited, if indeed the legends were true, Mr. and Mrs. Snow still could not explain some of the strange things that happened to them after they moved to Waverly. Their move was a hurried one. News of the purchase of the plantation manor attracted curiosity seekers, not all of them desirable or trustworthy, and Mr. and Mrs. Snow moved their family to Waverly earlier than they had planned to protect the structure from pillage. During the 49 years that Waverly stood vacant, vandals did little to damage it. Only 3 of the more than 700 walnut spindles outlining the stairs and the balconies were missing, and only one of the Venetian glass sidelights was broken. Mirrors and chandeliers, carpets, ornamental plasterings, and brass cornices remained undisturbed, just as the final young resident had left them. Intruders respected Waverly too much to destroy it, or perhaps they were afraid what the ghosts might do. Living conditions were rather primitive the first few months after the Snows began their restoration of Waverly. There was no electricity and there was no water either. During those early months, life for the Snows was much more difficult than it had ever been for members of the Young family who lived there prior. One night, the first week they moved into Waverly, the entire family was awakened by what sounded like an explosion in or near the house. The Snows grabbed up their flashlights and made a hurried search of the premises to find out what had blown up and to assess the damage. But they found absolutely nothing that could have caused the startling noise. A few nights later, the episode repeated. Every Everybody in the family was awakened by a loud explosion. A search was made, but nothing was found. These explosive noises continued 2 or 3 nights each week during the first year the Snows lived there at Waverly. After a while, they became somewhat accustomed to them and did not get out of bed to investigate. They would just mutter drowsily, "Ugh, there's that noise again," and then they'd turn over and go back to sleep. "We still wonder about that explosive sound repeated night after night," Mr. Snow said later. "It sounded like the noise made by slapping a big board or some other wide, flat object down on the surface of water with great force. It was louder than that, but that's the best description I can give of it. It seemed that something supernatural perhaps, was objecting to our moving into Waverly. We were never really afraid, but we were annoyed and puzzled, and we still are. After that first year, the baffling noise was never heard again. Some months after the cessation of the nighttime explosions, another presence, a gentle presence, came to Waverly. Mr. Snow was walking across the upstairs balcony one day when a child's voice called quite distinctly, "Mama, Mama." Mr. Snow glanced down quickly, half expecting to see a child standing beside her, but no one was there. It was not the familiar voice of one of her own children, nor did she recognize it as belonging to any child she knew. It was clear and sweet, and it had a memory stirring quality as if it were calling from a long time past. That was the first of many occasions when Mistress Snow heard the child call out. Often it seemed that the little girl followed her as she went about her household tasks, and occasionally she would call, "Mama, Mama," as though to remind her busy mother that she was there. Though she never saw her, Mistress Snow pictured the caller as maybe 4 or 5 years old, a dainty little girl with blonde curly hair. Several times the child's calls came during the night, waking Mistress Snow and sending her across the hall to see about her children, even though she knew it was not they who called out. Late one night, the Snow's daughter, who was about 10 or 12 years old at the time, came into her parents' room and said, "I heard the little girl calling. Is she all right?" Each time she heard the little girl calling for her mamma, Mr. Snow wondered who the phantom child was and who her mother was. Sometimes Mr. Snow's heart ached for them, for the sadness of a little girl lost. There are several small graves in the burying ground near Waverly, but records do not indicate that there were deaths among children in the Young family. All 10 of Colonel George Young's children grew to adulthood, yet Mr. Snow believed that the voice belonged to a child who was accustomed to being at Waverly and who felt at home there. The voice could have been that of one of the young grandchildren of the Young family who returned to Waverly with her mother to spend the war uh, during the Civil War there at the house. Or it might have been the voice of a child who came with her family to be a refugee at Waverly during the tragic months of defeat and reconstruction of the Civil War. Many people accepted Colonel Young's hospitality during that time, and some of them likely brought small children with them. The spirit of the little girl, whatever her background, most often made herself known by her soft, endearing calls for her mother. But there were other evidences of her presence. Sometimes, particularly on long summer afternoons, Mr. Snow found the imprint of a child's body on a freshly made bed in the upstairs bedroom. The imprint looked as if if a little girl, tired from play, had gone upstairs and had crawled into the high bed to take a nap in the cool quietness of the empty room. The child's calls and her afternoon naps continued over a period of 5 years or so. The manifestations of her presence were not made daily or even weekly, but Mr. Snow missed her when she stayed away long. There was a time when Mr. and Miss Snow decided to sit inside that room and just watch the bed for a while to see what would happen. So they sat together in the room, and the afternoon passed, and then it started to grow dark. And as Mr. and Miss Snow were talking to each other, suddenly they caught movement out of the corner of their eyes and looked to the bed where they saw movement on the blankets. It looked as if the impression just suddenly appeared on the bed, the outline of a little girl lying there. Mr. and Mrs. Snow, though shocked as they were, continue their conversation as best as possible. They sat there that way, and the impression stayed on the bed. The impression was so distinct, you could see the outline of the head in the pillow, as if a head was laying back against it, a small child's head. They continued to watch, and maybe an hour or two passed as it was getting darker, but they had a light on in the room, just a dim lamp so as not to disturb their little girl ghost. When eventually there was more movement on the bed, this time the outline decreased a little, as if a child had sat up, and then the motion moved to the side of the bed. It was like as if a child had slid down the bed, and the sounds of tiny footsteps left the room. One day, while she was busy in the kitchen, Mr. Snow heard the child's voice right beside her. Mama, Mama. Mr. Snow recalled earlier. My goodness, I thought she would reach up and grab my apron. She was that close. For the first time, though, the child sounded distressed, a little bit of a sob in her voice. Mama, Mama, she called, as though she needed the immediate reassurance of her mother's presence. Mr. Snow asked out loud to her, What's wrong? Do you need anything? You know I'll help you if I can. Up until that point, Mrs. Snow had never talked to the spirit, but this time she gave it a try. Unfortunately, there was no reply. And for the longest time, the child's voice was not heard at Waverly, and the bed in the upstairs bedroom stayed neatly made. It seemed the little girl was indeed lost, but it wasn't long later, after the daughters of the Snow family grew up and moved out, got husbands of their own, that Mr. and Mrs. Snow, a little bit elderly and but still there caring for their house and giving tours, started noticing once again the outline of a small child on that bed in the guest room during the afternoon hours. Not every day, not the same days, just randomly. Miss Snow would try to smooth out the cover top and then leave the room only to come back several minutes later and find the impression right back where it was. So she decided to leave the little girl alone. The good thing was they never heard the little girl cry out. Only her impression remained on the bed. And after a few hours, it would disappear on its own. The Snow daughters did some research on the property and found that there was a child who died in the house there. They believed it was the child of a neighbor who had come over with her mother while the mother was very ill and being cared for by the Young family. They say the little girl one morning got up early and was walking up the stairs between the second and third floor balconies when she accidentally stumbled and fell to the landing below, and her little neck broke on impact. The child's name is not known, but it is in the records, and the Snows believe that that is the little girl who has been haunting their home and who takes her afternoon naps in that bed. I've been to the house before, and I did not see the impression of the child, but the room is roped off, so you can only stand in the door and look inside. You can't walk in. But I have seen the impression of little child's feet, footsteps going across the carpet from the bed to the door, as if a child had gotten up and left the room. I didn't see the little girl herself, but hopefully I can get back there one day. Mr. and Mrs. Snow have passed on. The house did close temporarily. I'm not sure if it's reopened for tours again. Hopefully it has. Hopefully the Snow's daughters are still caring for it and opening it for tours. But if you ever get anywhere near, even though it's kind of out there past Columbus, Mississippi, if you ever get out that way toward West Point, please stop by Waverly. Perhaps call the Visitor Bureau first in Columbus and they can tell you if the house is open for tours now. But that was the story of the little girl lost. And I hope you've enjoyed my ghost stories tonight. And the ghost photo that I showed earlier, there it is again. the ghost photo I captured at Sturtevant Hall. Very creepy. And that's also a beautiful place to visit. Well, because I'm having some issues with my allergies, I'm going to go ahead and close off for the night. But let me go ahead and flash up our commercial again because we want you to subscribe. So there you have it. And also be sure to visit myhaunteddolls.com, my website, where I've got all my books out there for purchase. Books about my haunted collection. But there's the book about my haunted neighborhood that I grew up in. I have it here in my hands here. And there's even novels based on some of the haunted items in my collection and my own collection of horror stories. So be sure to check those out. Be sure to check out, scrolling below there, thewitchdoctor.com for Dr. Kelsey's wishing machine. It seems to be a very interesting item, and people have had success with that. And also his books, Dating the Dead and Spectrophilia. Go to datingthedead.com to check out that book about strange and unusual marriages and dating that involve the supernatural. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. I've been getting stuffier as the show has gone on. I'm sorry I didn't quite make 2 hours, but I made most of it. So we'll be back next week. Hopefully Catherine and Kelsey will be back and they'll do their Dybbuk box opening. But until then, stay cool and happy hauntings, and like and subscribe. Go to My Haunted Dolls on YouTube if you're not already there, and like and subscribe there too. And we will see you next week, everybody. Peace out. Good night.